can't believe it's been 2 years since my last grilling episode. I have a lot more and a lot more updates. Stay tuned. So for this week's episode, I decided we need to do some more grilling, and this is the great time of year to do grilling. And you know what I haven't done is showcased any wines from South America, so I'll take care of it in this week's episode. We're going to look at 2 wines from Argentina, both Malbecs, to go with a certain cut of meat called picanha. And the first time I had it, and maybe you have too, was at a Brazilian steakhouse. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna make it myself if I can find the cut, which I was able to. So if you stay till the end of the episode, we'll talk a little bit about the picanha itself, the cut of meat, and then one of my true and tried techniques for grilling, really most cuts of meat and even chicken on a charcoal grill. On a gas grill, it probably still works too, but I do charcoal here. So let's take a look at these 2 wines, both Malbecs from Argentina, and a little bit about the Malbec grape itself and some characteristics of it, and then we'll jump right into what I made with it. So I picked 2 wines from Argentina, and guess what? I've never had these. I've had some wines from Malbec, and it's been years, and sometimes the Malbecs from Argentina are noticed like, oh, they're just great value wines. But how do you know which ones are really good to try? And you know, is a $20 one as good as, say, some of the ones I saw at my wine store that were 60 and plus? So I think if this is your first time trying a Malbec, you don't need to go $65, of course. There's some great ones between even the $10 and $20 range, and that's where mine fall in. So I'll look at my 2 that I tried with my Brazilian steakhouse dinner. Give you my thoughts on those. We'll talk a little bit about the Malbec grape and why it's so popular in Argentina. So the 2 wines that I tried for this week's episode are you ready? The Trivento, and it's the 2018, and it's the Reserve Malbec. Again, never tried it before. And then another one I've never tried before is the Familigia Meschini, and it was a 2016 Malbec. And what's interesting about both wines is, well, I guess the first wine is a very mass-produced Malbec. You know, the grape grows very well in Argentina, and I think it was 8.5 million bottles of this wine, and they had it in cases in my grocery store. And I had never seen it before. I've seen ones like Alamos and Norton, one of those very mass-produced Malbecs, they're fine. But this one I found at my local grocery store. Again, it was between $10 and $15, and it was just great. And it's very sort of typical of both of these wines. So both of these wines had black cherry notes, and they were plum, and they had black currant. And the thing I want you to remember about the Malbecs, especially the ones from Argentina, is they're so soft and supple. If you've been a little scared about trying a red wine, I think the Malbecs from Argentina are a good one for you to try, or if you have a friend and she's a little leery about trying red wines, I think the Malbecs from Argentina are just a delicious first step into the world of red wines. Very supple, and we're going to talk a little bit about what I mean by body. You know, so when I say it's a very medium-bodied wine, very silky, the acidity is not too high, the tannin isn't too high, these beautiful red fruits and some black fruits, even a little bit of cocoa and a little bit of smoked bacon in there. Some very nice aromas and very nice feel, not too tannic. And again, both of these wines, under $20, blew me away. I couldn't believe they were both under $20. Because sometimes I was a little reluctant to showcase Malbecs on my show, is I'd say for the last, 10 years or so, when I've tried Malbecs, they seem very much like you would pay $10 for them, you know, so they're okay. They just didn't fit maybe my taste. But both of these wines, absolutely fantastic. Absolutely recommend them. And I'm going to put some other Argentine Malbecs that I do recommend in my description box. And I'm going to do some more episodes on grilling, because it's just what a great time of year to grill and to try some wines with it. So let's take a little bit of time and we'll talk about the Malbec wine, and then I want to talk a little bit more about what does the whole body of a wine mean. So the Malbec grape really is known for being part of one of the Bordeaux varieties of grapes that will go into the Bordeaux blend. But that sort of fell a little bit out of fashion, especially after phylloxera. Remember from our show, that's the louse that really eats at the grapevines and just ruins it. It was a huge, devastating impact in all of Europe. But what was nice about, I think it was in 1868, a French botanist came to Argentina and planted it. So all of the vines in Argentina have never known that sort of stress about phylloxera. So they're very healthy and they're thriving. And in France, the Malbec grape, which sort of is a little late ripening and it's a little difficult to work with, so it ended up being quite popular in the Loire Valley and a little bit more in the south of France in the Cahors wines. So you won't see those too often. It's very hard to find. You'd have to really look at those wines. So Malbec, even though it had its beginning in France, now it's almost always associated with Argentina and what the Argentinians have done with this wine. So it does great in a high elevation. It just thrives and it produces some wonderful wines. And so this grape in particular, again, is that sort of both of these wines. You might hear that whole term fruit forward and soft, silky body. So let's talk a little bit about both of those. So for the body of a wine, and we've talked about this a little bit more, but let's spend some time on it this time because both these wines had a pretty medium, a little bit medium plus on the body. And you're probably thinking, well, what does that mean, Trent? Well, that means the body is usually the weight. So when you take a sip of the wine, like I'll do right now, and I think, how does that feel on my tongue? And it's hard to describe, but here's one of those great benchmarks. You think of drinking a glass of milk, and those of you who like skim milk or non-fat milk, it has very just sort of a watery texture, and you may like it, but it just sort of splashes all over your mouth and it goes down, it's no problem. And then those of us who like, say, maybe the 2% has a little more body, which for wine terms is viscosity, so it has a little more viscousness. It feels a little bit more, there's more going on in your mouth, and it sort of coats all over your mouth. Not dry, and it's not acidic, it's just heavy and coating. And then those of us who've had, say, whole milk, if those of us who still drink it, or even a light cream, or a full fat milk, and it's like, whoa, it's just very heavy and thick all over your mouth. That's usually what's considered a body that is a heavy body. So think a heavy body, how it feels on your tongue versus a light body, something like a skim or non-fat milk. And it is true, it's usually be found in red wines, but not all. There are some Chardonnays that are also very heavy body. So there could be some white wines that also have a very heavy body. And sometimes if you look at the alcohol, sometimes known as ABV, if you look at the back of the bottle, and sometimes it says, 12.5, probably going to be a very lighter bodied wine. Or if it's, 14 or anything above 13.5, some of the Zinfandels that come from California, they're 15 plus. You put those on your mouth. Yes, it's a heavy body, but sometimes, at least for me anyway, the alcohol is so high, I'm getting the burning sensation in addition to how heavy it is in my mouth. So there is a correlation between that sort of, heaviness of the body and the alcohol, which really talks about the viscosity of the wine. So I think the milk is a good analogy. It sort of gives you an idea of if it's light body, skim milk. If it's heavy body, think of whole milk or light cream or half and half, something like that. And that's good. So both of these wines really sort of got labeled as textbook examples of Argentinian Malbecs. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of the descriptions are that Argentine Malbecs are very fruit forward. And you're thinking, what does fruit forward mean? Well, we just talked about body and sort of that heaviness versus the light body and how that is related to sort of the alcohol. So if it's 13.5 or above, it's heavy. If it's 12.5 or less, it's going to be a very light body. Well, fruit forward means that when you smell it, and like remember I said this one smells like plum and it smells like black cherries and black currants and maybe some blackberries. You sort of get the fruitiness part, and then you're like, it smells like fruit, and then you go and you take your first sip, like I'm gonna do right now. And you're like, wow. Oh, I can totally taste the fruit, and it has like fresh blackberry, maybe even some jam. And notice I'm still talking about the fruit. I haven't talked about maybe the acidity or that it's tannic, because it's not there, right? So the fruit forward part means all the fruit comes first, and then maybe I can tell if it's kind of has some acidity or if it's tannin. Where there are some Cabernet Sauvignons, I'm gonna grab a glass and I'm gonna put it here like, yeah, I get the black currant, I get the plum, and then my whole mouth is dry, and it's tanning and it's gripping, and which there are times when that's what you want, right? I expect it from that. So fruit forward is usually associated with some of those California Zinfandels and Syrahs and Australian Shiraz wines. Nothing wrong, has nothing to do with, is it good or is it bad? It's just wines that are very ripe. The fruit is right there, and it's probably going to be a wine that is not very old because again, the fruit recedes as the wine ages. So very, very typical, nothing wrong with it. But both of these wines, you may think about, oh yeah, they're a little bit more fruit forward. And so when you see that description, all I want you to think about is the fruit is prominent, and everything else maybe is a little in the background, right? So the star of the show will be the fruit, and then the other players will be the acidity and the tannin is maybe a good way of thinking about it. So both of these wines are fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about one of my grilling techniques and the cut of meat that is very popular in the Brazilian steakhouses. If you've been to Fogo de Chao or some of the other ones, I think it's Texas de Brazil, that is also a pretty good a nationwide chain, and you've been there. Let's talk a little bit about the cut of meat and my grilling technique. So the cut of meat I chose is a picanha. Well, that's how it's pronounced. And I'll put the spelling and some great websites I found about how to grill it in my description box. So this picanha, when you go to the Brazilian steakhouse, you'll usually see it, and it's from the rump of the cow, which is sort of interesting, but it has a huge fat cap on it, and you'll usually see it as I grilled it, where I kind of sliced it and then I curved it and I put it on a skewer, and I also left some pieces as just plain steaks, and it seemed like the recipes that I found online, they did both. The thing to remember though is, so of course you can put it on your skewer, you can grill it as a steak, but very little seasoning. I put sea salt and I put a little bit of smoked black pepper on it, and that was it, and it was just delicious. So you get the cuts of meat, again, the picanha, and you're definitely going to have to go to a butcher. It won't be in any grocery store, but maybe you're lucky. They do have where you are. And tell them you want the picanha cut, and I think they'll know what you're talking about, and you can go from there. So I had my grill and I was all ready, and one of the techniques that I just live by is indirect heating. And what does that mean, Trent? Well, that means on my grill, I have a very hot side and then a very cool side. It's just the heat that comes from the other side. And there are some people who suggest putting their meat on the hot side and searing it. The problem with searing it that I've always found is the flames will usually spark up, especially with a cut of meat that is very high in fat, like the picanha, and your whole cut of meat is just engulfed in flames, and it's not a good idea. So with this one, and tell you the truth, I do this with all of my chicken recipes, and I get some very nice compliments on my chicken, so that's great. I take it and I put it on the cool side first, and I sort of let it do its primary cooking there. And then as my coals continue to cook down and get a nice ashen gray, Then I move it over to the hot side, and that's where I sort of do my final caramelizing or my browning. And it just sort of is a great way of controlling it so that I don't have my meat that's burned charred. It's sort of caramelized charred. And so that's what I did. I did it with my picanha, and my wife loved it, and I liked it, and it worked out just so well. I'm so glad my local butcher had it. So again, I'll put that in the description box. It's called picanha. I'll put the spelling of it and give you the links to some of the recipes that I thought were fairly interesting. And if you go to a Brazilian steakhouse like Fogo de Chao or Texas of Brazil, a lot of the famous sides they'll serve with it are garlic mashed potatoes. So I had mashed potatoes with mine. Didn't put the garlic in it. I just had regular mashed potatoes. And then I had, which I love, black beans and steamed white rice. And of course I had a salad. And one of the vegetables that they recommend at the steakhouse when you go to, again, Fogo de Chao or Texas de Brazil, is grilled asparagus. I do love grilled asparagus, but I do not like grilled asparagus anywhere near my beef, and I want grilled asparagus nowhere near my red wine. And it's funny because the green asparagus is one of those vegetables that people sometimes serve with the steaks, and for the life of me, I don't know why. Because if you've ever had asparagus with a red wine, let me know what you think. But to me, it's always a disaster. If I want asparagus, I'm going to have it with a Sauvignon Blanc or some other kind of white wine, not with my red wine. But anyway, I'd love to know what you think about that one. Now, maybe thinking, Trent, well, you looked at two wines from Argentina. Do you recommend one over the other? I recommend both. But the first one, the Trivento, is maybe the more a little more heavy-bodied, I would say. It's a little more plummy. It's very silky. In addition to being it's medium-bodied, very easygoing, and it went very well with the picanha. And for the other one, which I believe is the Familigia Meschini, that one, I'd say it was 2016. That maybe had something to do with it. Maybe had a little more tannin, a little more acidity. It wouldn't be one I would maybe just sit and sip, but wow, it sure went well with the meat. So maybe if you look and you have two to choose from, and maybe you're one of those people and you're like, Trent, I love cabs. I like wines that are on the drier side, go with that one. But if you're like, Trent, I like wines that are supple, like Merlots from California, or maybe some Zinfandels or Syrahs and Shiraz, go with the Trivento. I think you'll be happy. And it doesn't matter because you spent the same amount of money, so you'll be in good shape. So you have two great wines. Of course, I recommend getting both, like we did. And we had both wines with that meal, and they were both fantastic. So you really can't lose with other wine. So there you go. We looked at two wines to have with the picanha steak, Brazilian steakhouse favorite. Two wines from Argentina, the Malbec grape, and it made some delicious, affordable, easy drinking, food-friendly wines. Wow, what a great find. And so this was our first grilling episode of 2020. I'm gonna do at least 3 more. I can't wait to try some different ones. And guess what? Our very first, for the most part, South American showcase on Malbecs from Argentina. Delicious. I can't wait for you to try them and let me know what you think. And let me know if you can find the picanha and when you grilled it, what happened and did you like it? I hope you do. So thank you for sharing our channel with your friends and families and coworkers. I hope you're safe, happy, and enjoying the very beginnings of summer. And I look forward to sharing more about the world of wine together. So until next time, everyone, cheers.